The Storm and the Stranger. The storm arrived without warning, a furious force tearing through the sunlit serenity of Key West. The once crystal blue sky darkened into a menacing shade of gray, rolling clouds swallowing the horizon. The wind howled, lashing against palm trees and sending loose sand spiraling into the air. Tourists and locals alike scrambled for cover, seeking refuge from the chaotic tempest brewing over the ocean. Yet, amidst the chaos, Emma Carter remained steady. Her boots crunched against the dampening soil as she led a group of tourists along one of Key West's most challenging coastal trails. She knew these paths like the back of her hand. Every hidden turn, every deceptive slope, and every breathtaking viewpoint that made the journey worthwhile. "Come on, everyone, just a little farther, and we'll reach shelter," she called over her shoulder, her voice barely cutting through the howling wind. Despite the brewing chaos, Emma's determination never wavered. These trails weren't just a job to her, they were home. The raw beauty of nature, untamed and unpredictable, was a reminder that life's simplest moments often held the most meaning. But then she saw him, a lone figure, stumbling down the rocky incline ahead, completely out of place. Emma's sharp eyes scanned the man as he tried to navigate the terrain. His ruined linen blazer and Italian leather shoes were wholly unsuited for the rugged environment. And the way he moved, unsteady, uncertain, set off alarm bells in her head. What was he doing here? Her gut twisted with unease. She quickly turned to the group behind her. "Change of plans. Follow the secondary path. I'll meet you at the shelter." But Emma, one of the tourists, hesitated as thunder rumbled overhead. "Go," she commanded, leaving no room for argument. With that, she pivoted, rushing toward the mysterious stranger. The rescue. "Hey, you," Emma shouted over the roaring wind, pushing forward against the storm. The man turned toward her, revealing a handsome but disheveled face, smeared with dirt and a shallow cut on his forehead. His piercing blue eyes, though cold and calculating, held something else, something she hadn't expected. Fear, vulnerability, a desperate need for help. Before he could speak, his foot slipped. "Damn it," Emma muttered as he collapsed onto his knees, landing in the wet, muddy earth. "More work for me. Great." She hurried to his side, crouching beside him. His expensive clothes were soaked and torn, his hands trembling slightly. He was clearly struggling, and Emma wasn't sure if it was just the storm or something more. "Drink this," she ordered, pulling a water bottle from her backpack and tilting his chin up with a firm but gentle grip. He hesitated before taking a small sip, wincing as if the action itself was difficult. "Now tell me," Emma said, her voice sharp. "Who are you, and what the hell are you doing here?" The man exhaled shakily. His lips trembled before he finally muttered, "Alex. My name's Alex. I was just exploring." "Liar." Emma narrowed her eyes. Everything about him screamed wrong. His expensive watch, his perfectly styled, though now rain-soaked hair, and his complete and utter lack of preparedness told her one thing. This man didn't belong here. Yet, she didn't have the luxury of interrogating him in the middle of a raging storm. "Right, Alex," she said, skeptical. "I don't know if you've noticed, but we're literally in the middle of a hurricane. Can you walk? Because I am not about to carry you." Alex tried to stand, only to stumble again. Emma sighed. Unbelievable. Without waiting for permission, she grabbed his arm, slinging it over her shoulder. He was heavier than he looked, but Emma had years of experience in survival training. She braced herself against the wind and dragged him forward. "Let's go before you get yourself killed, and I have to explain this mess to the authorities." As they trudged through the storm, Emma couldn't shake the feeling. This man wasn't just lost. He was running from something. Shelter and secrets. By the time they reached the designated shelter, Emma's group was already there, their faces painted with relief at her arrival. She eased Alex onto a wooden bench, ignoring the mix of gratitude and pride in his expression. "You're lucky I spotted you," she muttered, pulling out a first aid kit. As she carefully dabbed antiseptic onto the cut on his forehead, he flinched. "Next time, don't wander around in a storm dressed like some city slicker trying to play hero." Alex smirked, despite his exhaustion. "Who says I'm not a hero?" Emma rolled her eyes. "Yeah, sure. And I'm the Queen of England." He chuckled, a tired, almost teasing glint in his eyes. "You know," he said, leaning forward slightly, "you don't seem like someone who enjoys rescuing clueless rich guys in the middle of hurricanes." "I don't," she shot back. "But I also don't let people die just because they make dumb choices." His smirk faltered slightly, and for the first time, he looked at her differently. Not as just some local guide who happened to be in the right place at the right time, but as someone who had just saved his life. Before either of them could say more, Alex's phone rang. Emma's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the caller ID flashing across the screen before he quickly declined the call and shoved the phone into his pocket. Her instincts flared. That flicker of fear in his expression. It wasn't the storm he was running from, was it? "Answer it," she said bluntly. "It looks important." Alex's jaw tightened. "It's nothing I can't handle later." "Lie." Again. Emma studied him carefully, debating whether or not to press. She decided against it. For now. A mystery begins. As the storm raged on outside, Emma sat across from Alex, observing him with quiet curiosity. Who was he really? Why was he in Key West, completely unprepared and obviously hiding something? She had no doubt that he was trouble, but trouble had a way of changing everything. Emma didn't know it yet, but saving Alex Whitmore that day was about to turn her world upside down. And as for Alex, he had no idea that the woman who saved him would soon be the only person he couldn't afford to lose. The unexpected proposition. Morning after the storm. The storm had passed, leaving Key West wrapped in an eerie morning silence. It was the kind of quiet that only came after nature had spent all its fury, a stillness that carried the scent of salt, damp earth, and renewal. The streets, once battered by the fierce winds, were now scattered with broken palm fronds and puddles of rainwater reflecting the clear blue sky. Inside a small weathered cottage on the outskirts of town, Emma Carter stood at the kitchen counter, lost in thought. The coffee in her mug had gone cold, untouched as she stared blankly through the window, watching the world slowly wake up. She should have felt relieved. The storm had passed, no serious injuries were reported, and the tourists she had been guiding were safe. But her mind kept circling back to him. Alex Whitmore, a stranger she had dragged out of a hurricane, a man with too many secrets and a presence that still lingered in her thoughts. His eyes, that sharp blue, had held something. Something unspoken, something that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. What was he running from? A firm knock on the door broke her train of thought. Frowning, Emma wiped her hands on her jeans and made her way to the entrance. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her mother was still resting, and her few close friends would usually text before stopping by. When she pulled the door open, she almost slammed it shut again. You again. There stood Alex Whitmore, looking significantly better than the mess she had rescued the day before. Gone was the mud-streaked, exhausted man from the storm. Today, he looked far more put together, dressed casually, but still unmistakably expensive. A crisp, simple white button-down, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, fitted dark jeans, and, of course, a watch that probably cost more than Emma's entire cottage. Despite his refined look, he still seemed out of place, standing in front of her worn wooden door. "Hope you don't mind visitors," he said, smirking slightly. "I thought I'd stop by to thank you for saving my life yesterday." Emma crossed her arms, unimpressed. "Didn't think guys like you believed in saying thank you. And for the record, saving you was way more trouble than it was worth." Alex chuckled, running a hand through his wind-tousled blonde hair. "Fair enough. But I figured I owed you more than a simple thanks." So I have a proposition for you. Emma narrowed her eyes. A proposition. Here we go. The offer. Alex leaned slightly against the doorframe, his presence annoyingly relaxed, as if he had all the time in the world. I want you to be my personal guide while I'm here, he said. Show me the real Key West, the places tourists don't see. In exchange, I'll pay you double whatever you make in a week. Emma blinked. That caught her off guard. You want to hire me? She asked, skeptical. Pretty sure Key West isn't lacking in luxury tour companies. Alex, why me? He shrugged, a glint of amusement in his eyes. Because you're honest, direct, and you don't seem to like me very much, he said smoothly. I think I need someone who won't fawn over me every time I blink. Emma snorted. You say that like you're some kind of celebrity. Alex didn't respond. Instead, his expression shifted, just slightly. Not enough for most people to notice, but Emma saw it. The flicker of something guarded, cautious. Interesting. Emma studied him for a long moment. The money was tempting. It would help with the stack of medical bills for her mother, and the cottage wasn't in great shape. The storm had made things worse, but something about Alex bothered her. Why do I get the feeling there's more to this than just sightseeing? She asked. Alex smirked, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Because you're observant. She hated how that sounded like a compliment. Fine, she finally said, sighing. I'll do it, but only because I need the money. She pointed a stern finger at him. Don't think this makes us friends. And I'm not putting up with any rich boy nonsense. Alex raised his hands in mock surrender. Deal. Emma rolled her eyes. She had a feeling she was going to regret this. Secrets in the sand. Later that afternoon, Emma took Alex to one of Key West's best-kept secrets, a secluded beach, hidden behind rocky cliffs. The sand was untouched, the waves rolled in with a gentle rhythm, and the golden sunlight stretched over the ocean in stunning hues. It was a place few outsiders ever saw. Alex stood at the edge of the shore, gazing out at the horizon. This is incredible, he admitted, the usual arrogance in his voice replaced by something quieter. Emma studied him carefully. You've never seen a beach before, she teased. Alex smirked, but his gaze remained distant, his expression unreadable. Not like this. Emma sat down on a smooth rock, watching the waves. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it was surprisingly peaceful. Then she asked the question that had been nagging at her all day. Why are you here, Alex? He hesitated. Do you always ask such difficult questions? Only when I think someone's hiding something, she shot back. Alex let out a soft laugh, though there was a trace of bitterness in it. Let's just say I needed a break from my life, he admitted, his voice lower, quieter. From my family. They have expectations. Emma tilted her head, intrigued. Expectations. Alex finally looked at her, his piercing blue eyes locking with hers, the kind that don't leave much room for what I want. There was something in his tone, something heavy. Emma felt a pang of empathy, though she didn't quite understand why. Before she could respond, his phone rang again. This time, he answered. Yes, I'm busy, he said curtly. His expression darkened. I told you, I'm not coming back right now. Figure it out. He ended the call abruptly, jaw tight, shoulders tense. Emma raised an eyebrow. Trouble in paradise. Alex smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. Emma knew he was hiding something. But for now, she let it go. What she didn't realize was that whatever Alex was running from, it was about to catch up with him. And when it did, her world would never be the same. The mask begins to crack. An uneasy morning. The following morning, Key West was alive with the familiar hum of activity. Fishermen prepped their boats at the docks, the scent of salt and fresh seafood filling the air. Locals gathered at the town's small market. exchanging greetings and laughter over baskets of ripe fruit and fresh bread. Emma Carter should have felt at ease in the comfort of her routine. But ever since Alex Whitmore barged into her life, like a misplaced storm, things had felt different. And she hated it. She found herself thinking about him far more than she wanted to admit. His guarded looks, the way he seemed so out of place, yet strangely drawn to the simplicity of her world. What was he hiding? Why had a man who clearly belonged in high-rise boardrooms and luxury cars ended up lost on one of the most challenging coastal trails in a raging storm? And why did she, of all people, care? With a frustrated sigh, Emma tied her boots, grabbed her bag, and headed out the door. She had agreed to be Alex's guide. She was going to do her job, nothing more. Or at least, that's what she kept telling herself. The tourist who wasn't a tourist. When she arrived at the cafe, Alex was already there, sitting at an outdoor table with 2 cups of coffee waiting for her. Emma frowned. "Am I supposed to be impressed?" she asked, crossing her arms. Alex smirked. "I figured if I was going to drag you around all day, the least I could do was supply the caffeine." Emma rolled her eyes but took a seat anyway. "You do realize Key West isn't exactly Manhattan, right?" she said, taking a sip. "If you're looking for 5-star restaurants and VIP treatment, you came to the wrong place." Alex leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "That's exactly why I'm here." Emma narrowed her eyes. Something about the way he said it felt too rehearsed, like he was trying too hard to sound casual. Before she could press him, a familiar voice interrupted. "Emma." She turned to see Mia, her best friend, approaching with an excited grin. "I was just about to." Mia froze mid-sentence, eyes darting between Emma and Alex. Then her expression changed entirely. Mia knew who he was. Emma saw the realization flash in her friend's eyes, a look of shock, recognition, and a little too much interest. Emma," Maya said, her voice suddenly high-pitched. "Can I talk to you for a sec?" Emma sighed, setting down her coffee. "Make it quick," she muttered before standing up and letting Mia drag her a few feet away. Once they were out of earshot, Mia spun around, eyes wide. "Emma," she whispered urgently, "do you have any idea who that is?" Emma frowned. "Yeah, some clueless rich guy who nearly got himself killed in the storm." Mia shook her head aggressively. No, that's Alex Whitmore, as in Whitmore Enterprises, as in one of the most powerful families in the country." Emma's stomach twisted. She knew Alex was wealthy, but she hadn't expected this. "Are you sure?" she asked, glancing back at him. Maya scoffed. "I might live in Key West, but I don't live under a rock, Emma. His face is on magazine covers. His family owns half of New York." Emma's fingers tightened into a fist. So, he really had been lying. Confrontation. When Emma sat back down, her entire demeanor had changed. Alex noticed immediately. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him carefully, his composed expression, the easy charm he wore like a second skin. "Tell me something, Alex," she said finally, keeping her voice neutral. "Why did you really come here?" Alex's smirk faltered for just a second, so brief that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Emma wasn't most people. "You already asked me that," he replied, sipping his coffee. "And I already told you." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I know who you are." Alex froze. For the first time, she saw real tension creep into his features, the mask cracking, just a little. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said smoothly, but Emma could hear the shift in his tone. "Mia recognized you," she continued. "You're not just some bored rich guy looking for an escape. You're Alex Whitmore, son of one of the most powerful businessmen in the country." She folded her arms. "So tell me, Alex, why is the heir to Whitmore Enterprises suddenly playing lost tourist in Key West? A long silence stretched between them. Alex set down his coffee without a word. Then he let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay," he admitted. "You got me." Emma's heart pounded. "So, what's the real story?" Alex hesitated, tapping his fingers against the table. Then he met her eyes. "I came here because I needed to disappear," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Emma didn't blink. "Disappear from what?" He held her gaze. "My father." The truth begins to unfold. Emma wasn't sure what she expected, but that answer wasn't it. "You ran away?" she asked, skeptical. Alex let out a humorless laugh. "Something like that." She waited for him to elaborate. When he didn't, she pushed further. "Why?" Alex sighed, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. Then he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "My father controls everything," he admitted. "My entire life has been a carefully planned out path, who I talk to, where I go, what I do. I've spent my whole existence being shaped into the next CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, but that's not who I am." Emma didn't interrupt. Alex stared at the table for a moment before continuing. "I was supposed to sign a deal, a huge expansion project, my father's biggest business move in years." Emma felt a strange sense of unease creep up her spine. "And?" she prompted. Alex hesitated again. Then, finally, he looked at her. "I walked away," he said. "And my father isn't the kind of man who lets things go." Emma's fingers curled around her coffee mug. "You're telling me you defied one of the most powerful businessmen in the world?" Alex nodded. "And now he's looking for me." Emma's breath hitched. She had known Alex was hiding something, but she never expected this. "Let me get this straight," she said. "You ditched $1 billion deal, ran away to Key West, and nearly got yourself killed in a storm because you didn't want to sign a contract." Alex gave a lopsided grin. "Pretty much." Emma shook her head. She had a very bad feeling about this. Because if Alex was right, if his father was truly looking for him, then she had just unknowingly stepped into a much bigger storm than the one they had just survived. And she wasn't sure either of them would make it out unscathed. The past catches up. A dangerous truth. Emma sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. Alex Whitmore, heir to one of the most powerful business empires in the world, was hiding in her town. She should have felt annoyed, maybe even furious, that he had dragged her into whatever mess he had left behind. But instead, all she felt was a creeping sense of unease. If Alex was telling the truth, if his father was really looking for him, then this wasn't just about a spoiled rich guy running from responsibility. This was something bigger, something dangerous. "You're serious?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Alex sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I know how it sounds. Sounds like a bad movie," she muttered. "Your billionaire father sent people after you because you walked away from a deal. That's ridiculous." Alex's jaw tightened. "It's not just about the deal, Emma," he said. "It's about control. My father doesn't tolerate defiance. If I don't go back on his terms, he'll make my life hell." Emma folded her arms. "So, what? You're just going to hide out in Key West forever?" Alex let out a humorless laugh. "I haven't figured that part out yet." Emma rolled her eyes. "Fantastic. That's reassuring." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the town carried on as if nothing had changed, waves rolling lazily onto the shore, seagulls swooping between fishing boats, laughter from tourists echoing down the street. But for Emma, everything had changed. She was now caught in the middle of a billionaire family's power struggle, and she had no idea how to get out. Shadows in the distance. That evening, Emma did something she never did. She locked her front door. She told herself she was being paranoid, but a nagging voice in the back of her mind wouldn't let go of the feeling that something was off. Alex's story had left her shaken, But what unsettled her more was how genuine he had looked when he told it. She had spent years reading people, spotting lies in the eyes of tourists who over-exaggerated their outdoor experience, or catching the fake smiles of out-of-town businessmen looking for a cheap thrill in Key West. Alex wasn't lying. And that made things even worse. After a restless few hours, she stepped outside her cottage, hoping the fresh sea air would clear her mind. The night was warm, the stars scattered like tiny flames across a velvet sky. But as she walked toward the pier, she noticed something. A black SUV parked near the town square. Her stomach tightened. That car didn't belong. Key West was full of old pickups, colorful scooters, and the occasional beat-up sit-in. But this was too polished, too sleek. She had lived here her whole life. She knew when something was out of place. And that SUV, it was very out of place. She turned sharply, heading straight for the one person who owed her some answers. The warning. Emma found Alex at the local dock, leaning against a wooden post, staring out at the dark waves. She didn't waste time. "Your father's men are here." Alex stiffened. He didn't ask how she knew. He just took a deep breath, his fingers curling into fists. "How many?" he asked. Emma folded her arms. "One car, black SUV, parked near the square. Too clean, too expensive, definitely not a local." Alex closed his eyes, muttering something under his breath. "They found me faster than I thought," he admitted. Emma felt her frustration spike. "You should have told me this was a possibility." Alex opened his mouth to respond but was cut off. Because at that moment, a man stepped onto the dock. He was tall, wearing a dark suit, too formal for Key West. His eyes locked onto Alex instantly. Emma instinctively stepped back. "Alexander Whitmore," the man said, voice smooth but cold. Alex straightened, his expression going completely blank. The easygoing, teasing man Emma had been dealing with for days was suddenly gone. "That's me," Alex said, voice unreadable. The man smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in it. "Your father wants you home. Now." Emma felt a chill go through her. Alex didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. The man's expression darkened. "This isn't a request." Emma didn't know what to do. But something told her that this wasn't going to end peacefully. A choice is made. The tension on the dock was thick. Emma could see it, the way Alex's shoulders tensed, the way the suited man's fingers twitched as if he were seconds away from grabbing Alex. Alex wasn't afraid, but Emma was. And she hated that. "If your father wants to talk," Alex said finally, "he can do it himself." The man's jaw tightened. "Don't be stupid, Alex. This is bigger than you." Alex let out a short, sharp laugh. "Yeah. Well, that's the problem, isn't it?" The man took a step forward. And before Emma could think, before she could process what she was doing, she grabbed Alex's wrist and pulled him away. "Come on," she muttered under her breath. Alex hesitated for a split second. Then he followed. And they ran. Through the narrow streets, past silent houses, their feet pounding against the pavement. Emma's heart was racing. She had no idea what she was doing. But the moment that man showed up, the moment she saw that look in Alex's eyes, she knew one thing for certain. Alex wasn't just running from his father. He was running from a life that had been decided for him. And now, she was running with him. The escape and the consequences. Running for their lives. The narrow streets of Key West blurred as Emma and Alex sprinted through the humid night air. Emma's heartbeat pounded in her ears, her breath coming in sharp bursts. But she didn't dare slow down. Behind them, she could hear the footsteps of the suited man closing in. They had to move faster. "This way," Emma gasped, yanking Alex toward a side alley. Alex didn't argue. He followed her lead, his own breath labored but controlled. He wasn't panicking. If anything, the adrenaline sharpened his focus. "Do you have a plan? Or are we just running? He asked. Running, Emma snapped. Unless you have a better idea. Alex didn't. The alley led them into a small courtyard where dim lanterns flickered above a collection of closed market stalls. It was late, and the streets were empty, for now. Emma skidded to a halt, pressing her back against the rough brick wall of an old seafood shop. Alex followed, breathing heavily, his fingers curling into fists. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed in the alley they had just left. Emma held her breath. Alex tensed beside her, his jaw tight. The suited man's voice drifted through the darkness. Alexander. Emma felt goosebumps rise on her arms. He sounded amused. You can run, but you can't hide. The man continued. Your father will find you. He always does. Emma felt Alex's body go rigid. But he didn't move. The footsteps grew fainter. Then, finally, silence. Emma exhaled slowly, forcing herself to breathe again. Alex clenched his jaw. He's playing with me. Emma turned to him. What do you mean? Alex's eyes flickered with something dark. Anger. Frustration. Something deeper. He could have caught us if he wanted to. Alex muttered. That was just a warning. Emma's stomach turned. This wasn't just about forcing Alex back home. This was about power. About making Alex realize he had no way out. Emma swallowed hard. So what do we do now? Alex turned his gaze to her, a decision already forming in his mind. We stop running, he said. Emma's eyes widened. Excuse me? Alex straightened, his expression hard. I can't keep hiding. If I do, my father will never stop coming after me. So what? Emma snapped. You just turn yourself in. Let him control you. Alex shook his head. No, I fight back. Emma blinked. And how exactly do you plan to do that? A slow, dangerous smile tugged at Alex's lips. By making sure he can't touch me. Emma didn't like the sound of that. A desperate plan. Emma led Alex back to her cottage, her mind still spinning from his words. This is a bad idea, she muttered, unlocking the door. Got a better one? Alex asked. Emma didn't. Her small home was dimly lit, the wooden walls creaking as the night wind brushed through. It was safe. For now. Alex paced, his hands on his hips. If I can get access to my father's business records, I can find leverage. Emma frowned. Leverage. Alex stopped pacing and turned to face her. My father has built his empire on more than just legal deals. I know there are things he'd rather keep hidden. Things that would make the board question his leadership. Emma's stomach dropped. You're talking about blackmail. Alex shrugged. I'm talking about evening the playing field. Emma ran a hand through her hair, exhaling sharply. This is insane, she muttered. You really think you can just take down a billionaire from a beach town in Florida? Alex met her gaze, determination burning in his eyes. I have to try, he said. Emma didn't argue. Because for the first time since she met him, she realized. He wasn't running anymore. The break-in. By midnight, they were outside a private marina, where a series of luxury yachts were docked. Let me get this straight, Emma whispered as they crouched behind a storage shed. Your father's guy is staying on a yacht. Alex nodded. Mason, he's my father's right-hand man. And you're sure his laptop is on board? Alex smirked. Mason is paranoid. He never leaves company records in the hotels. He keeps them close. Emma let out a breath, her pulse pounding. This is the dumbest thing I have ever done, she muttered. Alex grinned. You'll love it. She glared at him. I swear, if we get arrested. We won't, Alex promised. Just follow my lead. Emma didn't know how she ended up here, sneaking onto a billionaire's yacht in the middle of the night. But somehow it felt inevitable. Alex moved quickly, climbing over the railing with ease. Emma followed, more cautious, her hands gripping the cool metal. The deck was silent, the sound of the ocean lapping against the sides of the yacht. "Where now?" she whispered. Alex pointed toward a cabin door. "That's his office." They moved swiftly, their footsteps silent against the deck. Alex pulled out a lockpick from his pocket. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned about how good you are at that?" Alex grinned. "You'd be surprised what a privileged education gets you." The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. The cabin was sleek and modern, with polished wood and leather furniture. And there, sitting on the glass desk, was Mason's laptop. Alex moved toward it, pulling out a flash drive from his pocket. Emma kept watch by the door, her body tense. "Hurry," she whispered. Alex's fingers flew across the keyboard. Files loaded. Numbers flashed. Then, a sound. A footstep. Emma's heart stopped. Alex's head snapped up. The door handle turned. And just like that, their time was up. The price of defiance. Caught in the act, the cabin door handle twisted, and Emma felt her breath hitch. She locked eyes with Alex, who had seconds to react. Without hesitation, he slammed the laptop shut, grabbed the flash drive, and lunged for cover behind a leather chair. Emma barely had time to move before the door swung open. The man who entered was tall, broad-shouldered, and utterly composed. Mason. He took one step inside, then froze. His gaze swept the room, his sharp eyes narrowing. He could sense something was wrong. Emma pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. Alex stayed perfectly still, his body tense, waiting for an opening. Mason sighed, muttering to himself as he set his briefcase down. "I know you're here, Alex." Emma stiffened. Alex cursed under his breath. Mason turned toward the leather chair, his expression calm, almost amused. "You always did have a habit of making things difficult." Alex stood up slowly, flashing a smirk that Emma knew was fake confidence. "You should take that as a compliment," Alex said smoothly. Mason's lips curled slightly, but his eyes remained cold. "You have no idea how much trouble you're in, do you?" Mason asked, shaking his head. "Enlighten me," Alex said. Mason's expression hardened. "You think you can just run away? Embarrass your father? Do you have any idea what's at stake here?" Alex's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Emma's mind was racing. She had to do something. Then Mason's gaze flickered toward the slightly open desk drawer, where the laptop cord was still plugged in. His brows furrowed. He knew. Before he could react, Emma moved. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass paperweight, and threw it with all her strength. Crash! The glass shattered against the floor, making Mason instinctively flinch, giving Alex just enough time. With a burst of speed, Alex slammed into Mason, knocking him off balance. Emma grabbed Alex's wrist. "Run!" They bolted out the door, Mason's furious shout echoing behind them. A race against time. The yacht's deck was empty, but not for long. Alex and Emma sprinted toward the railing, their only escape. Behind them, Mason was already recovering, barking orders into a radio. "Cut them off. They're heading toward the docks." Emma's stomach dropped. "They have backup," she hissed. Alex cursed. "Then we better move fast." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the edge of the yacht. Emma's eyes widened. "You want to jump? Unless you'd rather stay and negotiate," Alex shot back. Emma glanced over her shoulder. More figures in dark suits were emerging onto the deck. They didn't have time. "Fine," she snapped. "But if I break a bone, I'm blaming you." Alex grinned. Then they jumped. The ocean swallowed them whole. Cold. Salt. The shocking impact of the water knocked the air from Emma's lungs. For a moment, she was sinking, disoriented in the darkness. Then strong hands grabbed her, pulling her up. She gasped for breath as they surfaced. Alex right beside her. "Swim," he urged. Emma didn't need to be told twice. The dock was close, but the sound of boots pounding against wood meant their pursuers were even closer. Somewhere above them, Mason was shouting orders, his voice furious. But in the chaos, Alex and Emma slipped into the shadows, vanishing into the labyrinth of docks and fishing boats. Hiding in the storm, they didn't stop until they reached Emma's old boat, docked in a quieter part of the marina. Dripping wet and out of breath, Emma climbed aboard, her body still buzzing with adrenaline. Alex pulled himself up beside her, his breathing ragged. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then Emma turned to him, her anger boiling over. "You insane idiot," she snapped, shoving him. "That was not part of the plan." Alex laughed, shaking his wet hair like a dog. "Could have fooled me." Emma glared at him. "You think this is funny? We just barely got out of there alive." Alex held up the flash drive, still intact. "But we got what we needed." Emma stared at it, chest rising and falling fast. "This is what's going to stop your father?" she asked, voice sharp. Alex nodded, his expression dead serious now. "It's leverage. My father wants to control me." "Fine. But now, I have something that can control him." Emma exhaled, rubbing her temples. "This is crazy," she muttered. Alex tilted his head, smirking. "And yet, here you are." Emma shot him a look. "Don't push your luck, Whitmore." Alex just chuckled. But Emma knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fallout. Hours later, in a sleek penthouse suite overlooking the ocean, Mason stood in front of a massive floor-to-ceiling window. Behind him, a voice spoke calmly. "You lost them." Mason's jaw clenched. Temporarily. There was silence. Then, "You disappoint me, Mason." Mason turned slowly, facing the figure seated behind an elegant glass desk. Jonathan Whitmore, a man known for ruthlessness, precision, and absolute control. Mason kept his tone even. "We'll find him again, sir." Whitmore's sharp blue eyes, so much like his son's, narrowed. "You'd better," he said coldly. "Because the next time you do, Alexander won't have anywhere left to run. No more running." The calm before the storm. The moonlight shimmered on the surface of the water, casting an eerie glow over the quiet marina. Emma sat on the deck of her old fishing boat, legs stretched out, her wet clothes clinging to her skin. Beside her, Alex Whitmore, heir to a billion-dollar empire, sat in silence, staring at the small flash drive resting between his fingers. For the first time since they had met, he looked uncertain. Emma wasn't sure if it was exhaustion or if reality had finally caught up to him. But for once, there was no smirk, no sarcastic remark, no charming arrogance. Just quiet. "You're awfully silent for someone who just pulled off a heist," Emma muttered, breaking the tension. Alex exhaled sharply, running a hand through his still damp hair. "I'm just thinking," he admitted. "This is it, isn't it? The point of no return." Emma nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." Alex turned the flash drive between his fingers. "I spent my whole life being told who I am, what I'll become, and for the first time, I finally have a way to break free." He looked at Emma then, his blue eyes unreadable. "But what if I don't know who I am without him?" Emma hesitated. She had spent most of her life fighting to survive, doing everything on her own. She had never lived a life of privilege, expectation, or corporate cages. But she knew what it meant to lose a part of yourself. She sighed, leaning her head back against the railing. "Then maybe it's time you find out." Alex stared at her, as if searching for something in her words. Then, finally, he smiled. A real smile. "Yeah," he said softly. "Maybe it is. The plan that changes everything." The next morning, Emma's small cottage was filled with tension. Alex stood near the kitchen counter, freshly showered and dressed in borrowed clothes. A simple t-shirt and jeans. Emma, on the other hand, was pacing. "So let's go over this again," she said. "We used the files to pressure your father into backing off. We threatened to expose whatever dirt you found on that drive." Alex nodded. "And if he refuses, we go public. No more hiding." Emma frowned. "And what's stopping him from retaliating?" "He still has more power, more money, more everything." Alex smirked. "Maybe. But what he doesn't have is an heir willing to play along anymore." Emma wasn't convinced. "Look, I get that you're all about defying your dad, but what if this doesn't work? What if he finds another way to pull you back in?" Alex's expression darkened. "Then I'll burn the whole damn empire down if I have to." Emma stared at him. For the first time, she saw not just rebellion, but conviction. He wasn't running anymore. He was ready to fight. She sighed. "All right, let's do it." Alex grinned. "Knew you'd come around." Emma rolled her eyes. Yeah. But if we die, I'm haunting you in the afterlife." Alex chuckled. Fair trade. The call that changed everything. They set up in a small internet cafe near the docks. Alex plugged in the flash drive, scanning the files with sharp focus. Emma sat beside him, sipping a stale cup of coffee, watching as rows of hidden documents appeared on the screen. And then, Alex's expression shifted. His entire body stiffened. Emma leaned forward. "What is it?" Alex's voice was deadly calm. "This isn't just corporate fraud." Emma frowned. "Then what is it?" Alex clenched his jaw. "It's criminal." Emma's stomach dropped. "You mean?" He turned to her, face pale. "My father isn't just a corrupt businessman. He's been funding illegal operations overseas, under-the-table arms deals, bribing government officials, you name it." Emma blinked. "Jesus," she whispered. Alex let out a slow, controlled breath. "If I release this, he won't just lose his company. He'll lose everything." Emma watched him carefully. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. Alex's gaze hardened. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He grabbed his phone, dialing a number. Emma held her breath. The call connected. "Alexander," Jonathan Whitmore's voice was smooth, but there was a hint of steel beneath it. "I assume you've come to your senses." Alex leaned back, smirking. "You assume wrong, Dad." A pause. Then, "I found your files," Alex continued. "And let me tell you, they're a hell of a read." Another silence. Then, for the first time, Emma heard something rare in Jonathan Whitmore's voice. Genuine anger. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into," Jonathan said. Alex chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Here's the deal," he said. "You leave me alone. No more goons, no more threats. In return, I keep this between us." Jonathan exhaled sharply. "And if I refuse?" Alex's voice was calm, but ice-cold. "Then I burn everything you built to the ground." Silence. Then, Jonathan laughed. "You really think you've won?" He mused. Alex smirked. "No, I think I've made it really inconvenient for you to win." Jonathan sighed. "I underestimated you." "Damn right you did." Another pause. Then, "Fine," Jonathan said. "Have your freedom, Alex. But don't think for a second that means you're safe." The call ended. And just like that, it was over. For now. The aftermath. Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Alex set his phone down, running a hand over his face. "That's it?" Emma asked. Alex laughed softly, shaking his head. "Not even close. But it's a start." Emma studied him. He looked lighter, as if the weight of his entire past had finally lifted. "So what now?" she asked. Alex turned to her, his blue eyes soft but uncertain. "I guess I figure out what life looks like when it's actually mine." Emma nodded slowly. "Good plan," she said. Then, smirking, she added, "Try not to get yourself killed in the process." Alex grinned, the old charm flickering back. No promises, Carter. And for the first time in his life, Alex Whitmore was truly free. Epilogue. A new beginning. 1 month later. The sun set over Key West, casting golden light over the ocean. Emma sat on the edge of the dock, her feet dangling over the water. Beside her, Alex leaned back on his hands, more at peace than she'd ever seen him. "You're really staying," Emma said. Alex smiled. "I'm really staying." She smirked. "Guess I'm stuck with you, then." Alex chuckled. "You love it." Emma rolled her eyes, but she didn't deny it. Because somewhere between a hurricane, a corporate scandal, and nearly getting killed, they had become something more. And for once, neither of them were running anymore. They were exactly where they were meant to be. Together. The final stand. Unfinished business. The warm evening breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom, but Emma knew better than to relax just yet. Sure, Alex had forced his father to back down for now, but something about the way Jonathan Whitmore laughed before hanging up didn't sit right with her. She glanced at Alex, who was staring at the ocean, deep in thought. "You think he's really letting you go?" she asked, voice cautious. Alex exhaled. "For now." Emma scoffed. "That doesn't sound reassuring." Alex turned to face her, a rare seriousness in his eyes. "My father is a man who thrives on control. He might let me go today, but tomorrow, he'll find another way to try and pull me back in." Emma crossed her arms. "So what do we do?" Alex hesitated. Then his smirk returned. "We disappear." A plan set in motion. The next morning, Emma and Alex stood at the docks, watching as a small charter boat was prepared for departure. Emma raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" Alex nodded. "I have money stashed away that my father doesn't control. Enough to start fresh." Emma's lips twitched. So the billionaire here did have an escape plan all along. Alex smirked. "What can I say? I like to be prepared." Emma rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her amusement. "So, where are we going?" she asked. Alex shrugged. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not being a Whitmore." Emma studied him for a long moment. Then finally, she said, "Sounds like an adventure." Alex grinned, reaching for her hand. "Only if you're coming with me." Emma's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his fingers, a slow smile forming on her lips. "Someone's got to make sure you don't get yourself killed." Alex laughed, pulling her toward the boat. And just like that, they left Key West behind. They left behind a life of expectations, lies, and control. They left behind the past, and together they sailed toward a future neither of them had planned for, but both of them wanted. Epilogue. 1 year later, the coastal town of Montera, California, was quiet, a far cry from the chaos Alex Whitmore had once lived in. But he liked it that way. The small bookstore cafe they had opened, Second Chances, had become a town favorite. Locals came in for coffee, books, and sometimes just to talk to the mysterious former billionaire and his no-nonsense business partner. Emma stood behind the counter, rolling her eyes as Alex charmed an elderly woman into buying an extra novel. "You are ridiculous," Emma muttered as the woman left with a bag full of books and a smile on her face. Alex smirked. "It's a gift." Emma huffed. More like a curse. But she smiled anyway. Because in this quiet town, with no family name, no corporate empire chasing him down, Alex had finally found something real. And so had she. Final words. Life didn't always turn out the way you expected. Sometimes it threw hurricanes and billion-dollar betrayals at you. But sometimes it gave you something better. A second chance, a fresh start, and, if you were lucky, someone to share it with.